sun not yet beginning to set over Parliament, despite the fire which damaged it so badly early in the new year. So much to talk about ahead of the budget. You'll know, of course, how difficult government's finances are, and frankly have been for perhaps the last 10 years, from around 2009. Xolani Mbanjwa is our business editor. He's here. He'll be here for our coverage of the budget. Lorenzo is a justice campaigner. He runs the Justice Fund. He's focusing specifically on issues around transport and socio-economic justice. Good afternoon to you both. Xolani, let me start with you. I hate to say this, but last year and the year before, when I spoke to you, just before budget, I said the finance minister at the time, Tito Mboweni, is in a difficult position. We could go back 10 years, things have been getting worse. Inakwa is in a very, very tough position coming out of the pandemic.
He's in a very, very tough position. He executed himself very well when he actually delivered the midterm budget in November. There were nice surprises there when he said state-owned entities that can't prove themselves will not get a bailout or guarantees. We're expecting him to stick to that word, because taxpayers really are tired of seeing money almost go down the drain with many of these state-owned entities. We want that direction. The investors want that assurance, and they want him to talk about how he is going to make sure that on the one hand he is going to fund an almost 40 billion rand, 350 rand relief of distress grant for the next year, while on the one hand he is going to have to fund the infrastructure program, which must be used to actually create more job opportunities. He has to also make sure that he delivers on some of the promises that were made by President Ramaphosa in his State of the Nation address. It's a very, very tough ask. And I will keep on saying this. With or without the COVID-19 pandemic, we were always in a situation where there are so many demands pulling on the left and the right. The biggest problem facing this country, in my view, I have to underline, is unemployment. If you look at that, you can't spend that between 37 billion rands and 40 billion rands on a basic on a 350 rand grant or a basic income grant as it is demanded, without making sure that employment is created and business as an environment in which to thrive. So many demands are coming out of this. Tomorrow this time, ratings agencies, investors, local, international, IMF, World Bank, everybody, including your Gogo Dlaminis, would have known by this time tomorrow whether he has what it takes to take this country in the right direction.
I'd like to see the person who argues that unemployment isn't our biggest problem. I'd like to meet them. Lorenzo, I mean, you run the Justice Fund, and you look particularly at issues of transport. You would have heard Xolani talking a moment ago about SOEs that don't deliver. I mean, I think in transport we can agree there are SOEs that have not delivered over the last few years. It seems in some ways that our public transport systems, and particularly when it comes to railways, have almost vanished. And in fact, they almost have.
Yes, Stephen, I think that's a big problem for us. We sit with a ever-diminishing public transport service. So you take rail, you take buses, you take the other forms and modes of transport. We are seeing the rapid eradication of those services. People are not using it. I use the train every day. Do you know that the average train that I travel on has about a 20% fullness capacity? It's tragic that people are not moving into the public transport systems, and people are scared. They fear the breakdown, they fear crime, they fear the non-scheduling of these services to run on proper times. So it's a massive credibility problem that we face with using our public transport services.
Is there an element, I mean, one of the things that comes out of this, and there are many different things, we could talk for hours on this, we could start at Cape Town International and look at what you see in terms of a divided society right there, but are people scared of mixing with other South Africans? And let me explain why I say this. We're coming out of a pandemic where suddenly everybody worked from home, or you didn't work. That integration, as shallow as it may have been, at least people were sharing physical spaces with each other. They weren't during the pandemic. Has this damaged our social fabric?
I do think so. I think that people are scared of coming back into public spaces where they have to be in close proximity to other people. So on trains, for example, there are seats you can sit on and seats that are demarcated to not sit on. You stand in overfull trains at the moment in some carriages, but the problem is, I think that people have lost confidence in that sense of I'm safe personally. So that notion of personal safety is a big thing. Safety in terms of crime, but also safety in terms of health. So you have this ever-growing complexity within the system, which our SOEs, and especially an SOE like PRASA, is not addressing. I've said before that the public transport experience for the commuter is a very deeply personalized experience. It's the individual commuter that says, I like this, I enjoy this, I feel validated by this service, it's on time, it makes me feel safe. That is not being addressed as a commuter experience at all across the public sector.
Xolani and Mbanjwa, you point to a successful economy. You're going to point to an economy that moves people around safely and relatively cheaply, whether it's the very fancy buses they have in Switzerland or the incredibly fast trains they have in China.
Yes, and it's deteriorated, and it should not have gotten this far. And we know how that happened between the machinations of people within Transnet and what happened with the minister there. The deterioration of the infrastructure, be it in Cape Town or KZN or Gauteng or the Free State, is something that has been sad to watch. People need access to affordable transportation so that they can access economic opportunities. If you can't go from point A to point B to look for a job or to get to a job, it's no point getting that job if you are going to just work for the transport. So it's really, really important that the transport knows. It's not only about public transport. If you look at it, Transnet Freight Rail has been having its own problems. They were hacked, they were having so many issues, and the exports were hit because they had problems. So it's not a personal or a thing only, but business has been hard hit by what's been happening in the transport sector run by government.
Lorenzo, there's also, one of the things that we have is our society is defined by apartheid spatial development. It's part of the definition of racialized inequality, really. The poorer you are, the further away you work from home. The poorer you are, the more at the mercy of a taxi driver, a taxi boss in some cases you are. If one of the ways around that, apart from obviously creating jobs, obviously education, obviously everything else, is a democratic transport system. If you can make it as easy to get to work for rich people and poor people, you're changing your society.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The notion is that poor people use public transport. And that's a false narrative in this country. We should be building a transport system that everybody wants to use. So there's a taxi from your home to the train station or to the bus station that gets you from the bus station and the train station to your place of employment, or to another taxi rank that takes you to your place of employment. So this fragmentation of how we put this narrative together about public transport is highly problematic. If we are going to build a successful democracy, as we all wish to build, we've got to have a transport service that speaks to everyone, rich and poor alike, that migrates onto these public platforms and use them to get to where they need to be. Right now, the rich drive their cars and the poor is at the mercy of a taxi or a train. That should not be the narrative. We should be proud of a public service and a public transport service, not look at it with skepticism and say, is the train going to arrive on time? And that's the main discussion this morning. We should be moving beyond that. And that's the state's duty, to give the commuter that confidence that whether you live in Randburg or Sandton or Soweto or in Langlaagte, you will get on a train because it's reliable. And that is missing at the moment.
Do you have any hope that that's going to actually happen? At the beginning of the pandemic, people talked about a reset in our society. I don't see anyone pushing the reset button. Control-Alt-Delete is gone.
You're absolutely right. It's a discussion we had a while back that nobody talks of reset anymore. It's a missing word right now, still in the midst of the pandemic. We were promised the reset. We were promised the idea that we'll go back to a new consciousness, the president said, a new society, a new economy, in his April 27th speech last year. That hasn't happened. There's no new society, there's no new economy, there's no new consciousness. And so the reset button is missing, it's broken. And I think we need to appeal to our leaders, our politicians, to come back to the table and rebuild that reset message, because that is actually fundamental. It's how we build a safe, secure, prosperous society, is that everybody stands around that reset button and says, push it.
Lorenzo Davids, thanks very much indeed. He knows where the Control-Alt-Delete buttons are. If you have not followed his journeys on Twitter, his train journeys, you're missing out on some of the most powerful storytelling there is currently in South Africa at the moment. We'll be back with more from our business editor, Xolani and Mbanjwa. He's going absolutely nowhere. I personally guarantee it until after the budget is safely delivered. tomorrow. We're live from Parliament through tonight ahead of tomorrow's budget speech. You can see, of course, beginning the first shadows to fall on the mountain just right next door to the battered remains of Parliament here in Cape Town.